The ceramic mug slipped from Stella's trembling fingers, shattering across the marble floor of the penthouse. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she stared at the man standing in the doorway. The same man who had ordered black coffee at her cafe every morning for 6 months. The same man whose grey eyes had watched her with unsettling intensity. The same man whose $500 tips she'd thought were mistakes. But now, surrounded by armed men in dark suits, with blood on his knuckles and murder in his expression, she finally understood. Adrian Marconi wasn't just a customer. He was the reason people whispered in fear when black SUVs rolled through the streets, and somehow, without meaning to, she had walked straight into his world. If you want to discover how Stella's ordinary life became entangled with the most dangerous man in the city, and what happened in that penthouse that changed everything, subscribe to the channel and leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. Every view helps bring more stories like this to life. Stella Reed had served thousands of cups of coffee in her 3 years at Rosie's Corner Cafe, but she had never forgotten a customer the way she remembered him. He always arrived at exactly 7:15 a.m. Monday through Friday. Same table by the window. Same order. Large black coffee, no sugar, no cream. Same worn leather jacket that looked expensive despite its age. Same newspaper. Actual paper, not a phone, that he'd read for exactly 20 minutes before leaving a $100 bill on a $15 tab. "You're staring again," whispered Maria, Stella's co-worker, as she refilled the pastry case. "Girl, I don't blame you. That man is illegally gorgeous." Stella felt heat crawl up her neck. "I'm not staring, I'm just observing." "Uh-huh," Maria grinned, pushing a strand of dark hair behind her ear. "Observing those cheekbones, that jawline, those eyes that look like a storm." Everything Maria said was true. The man was devastatingly handsome in a way that made Stella's stomach flip every time she approached his table. Sharp features that seemed carved from granite, dark hair that fell just slightly too long, and those eyes, grey as winter rain, that seemed to see straight through her cheerful barista persona to the exhausted single mother beneath. "Table 6 needs a refill," Stella said, grabbing the coffee pot to escape the conversation and her own thoughts. She wound through the morning rush, smiling at regulars, deflecting flirtations from the construction workers who came in smelling of sawdust and sweat. This was her life, splitting her time between 2 jobs, scraping together enough to cover rent on her tiny apartment and her mother's medical bills. Her hands hurt from the burns she'd gotten yesterday, washing dishes at the diner. Her feet ached in the cheap sneakers she couldn't afford to replace, but she smiled because that's what people needed from her. At 7:15 exactly, the bell above the door chimed. Stella's pulse quickened, an involuntary reaction she'd stopped trying to control. She told herself it was just habit, muscle memory from months of the same routine. It had nothing to do with the way her body seemed to wake up when he walked in. He moved with a predator's grace, and the cafe seemed to shift around him. Conversations quieted. Even the espresso machine seemed to hiss more softly. He took his seat by the window, and Stella felt his eyes find her across the room. She grabbed his mug. She knew which one he preferred now, the navy blue one without chips, and filled it with the dark roast she'd started making fresh at 7:10 just for him. "Good morning," she said brightly as she approached his table, that practiced smile fixed on her face. "The usual?" "Yes." His voice was deep, textured like whiskey and smoke. "Thank you, Stella." Her name in his mouth made her shiver. He'd learned it from her name tag months ago, but he said it like it meant something. "You're welcome, Mr." She paused, realizing she'd never asked his name. It felt too personal, too intimate. He was just the generous customer with the grey eyes. "Adrian," he said, and something flickered in his expression. "You can call me Adrian." "Adrian," she repeated, testing the weight of it. Italian, she thought. It suited him. "Enjoy your coffee." She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. "You look tired today." The observation was so unexpected that Stella froze. She'd gotten good at hiding the exhaustion, at masking the bone-deep weariness that came from working 70-hour weeks, but apparently not good enough. "I'm fine," she said automatically. "Just a busy week." His eyes moved over her face with an intensity that made her feel exposed. "You work too hard." Something in her chest tightened. When was the last time someone had noticed? When was the last time anyone had cared? "We all do what we have to do," she said softly. Before he could respond, Maria's voice called from behind the counter. "Stella, 3 cappuccinos for table 12. Stella escaped gratefully, but she felt his gaze on her back the entire time she made those cappuccinos. When she finally risked a glance toward the window, Adrian was watching her with an expression she couldn't read. It wasn't predatory exactly. It was something else, something that made her pulse race and her hands shake as she topped the drinks with foam. At 7:35, like clockwork, he stood, folded his newspaper, left $500 bills under his empty mug. Stella's breath caught. $500 on a $15 check. Again. She hurried to his table. "Sir, Adrian, I can't accept this, it's too much." He was already at the door, but he paused and looked back at her. In the morning light streaming through the window, his face was all sharp angles and shadows. "Yes, you can," he said simply. "And you will." Then he was gone, disappearing into a black SUV that Stella had never paid attention to before, but she noticed it now. She noticed the driver who wore a suit too formal for 7:30 a.m. She noticed the way the other pedestrians gave the vehicle a wide berth, like they instinctively knew to stay away. "Girl," Maria said, appearing at her elbow, "that man is either madly in love with you or you're about to star in a true crime documentary." Stella laughed, but the sound came out shaky. "Don't be ridiculous." Still, as she pocketed the $500, enough to cover the medical bill she'd been dreading, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted, that the careful distance she'd maintained between herself and the beautiful stranger had just collapsed without her realizing it. She had no way of knowing how right she was, or that by tomorrow morning, her entire world would shatter and reform around the grey-eyed man who drank black coffee and left tips that were really something else entirely. Protection, a promise, a claim. The call came at 11 p.m., just as Stella was finally falling asleep on the lumpy mattress in her studio apartment. "Stella Reed." The voice was male, professional, unfamiliar. "Yes?" Her heart immediately jumped to worst-case scenarios. Her mother, an accident, a hospital. "My name is Vincent Castellano. I'm calling on behalf of Adrian Marconi. He requests your presence at his residence immediately." Stella's mind went blank. "I'm sorry, what?" "Mr. Marconi has need of your services. A car is already outside your building. The driver will bring you directly." "I don't understand. It's 11 o'clock at night. I have work in the morning." "You'll be compensated for your time. Please, Miss Reed. It's urgent." The line went dead. Stella sat in the darkness of her bedroom, her phone still pressed to her ear, trying to make sense of what just happened. Adrian Marconi, the coffee customer, was requesting her presence at his home at midnight. Every rational cell in her body screamed danger. This was how horror movies started. This was how women disappeared. But another part of her, the part that noticed the $500 tips, the part that shivered when he said her name, was already pulling on jeans and a sweater. She peered through her window blinds. Sure enough, a sleek black car idled at the curb, exactly where the man said it would be. Stella's hands trembled as she texted her location to Maria with the message, "If I don't text you by 1 a.m., call the police." The driver was a mountain of a man in a dark suit who opened the car door without speaking. The interior smelled like leather and something expensive. Stella clutched her purse in her lap, watching the familiar streets of her neighborhood give way to areas she'd only seen in magazines. They climbed higher into the hills, where the city lights sprawled below like scattered diamonds. The houses became mansions, then estates. Finally, they turned through gates that opened automatically, rolling up a private drive to a building that looked like it belonged on the cover of Architectural Digest, the penthouse. Stella's stomach dropped as the elevator climbed 30 floors. When the doors opened, she stepped into a space that defied her understanding of what a home could be. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the entire city. Modern art hung on walls painted in shades of charcoal and cream. Everything was sharp lines and expensive taste. "Miss Reed." The man who greeted her was older, distinguished, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Stella's car. "I'm Vincent. Thank you for coming. Mr. Marconi is in his study. This way, please." Stella followed on shaking legs, taking in details that didn't make sense. The men stationed at intervals throughout the space, all in dark suits, all with suspicious bulges under their jackets, the monitors showing security feeds. The sense of controlled danger that permeated everything. Vincent knocked on a heavy wooden door. "Miss Reed is here, sir." "Send her in." That voice. Stella's breath hitched. The study was darker than the rest of the penthouse, lit only by a desk lamp and the glow of the city beyond the windows. Adrian sat behind a massive desk, and when he looked up, Stella's world tilted. Because this wasn't the quiet customer from the cafe. This was someone else entirely. His jacket was off, his white shirt unbuttoned at the collar. His sleeves were rolled up, revealing forearms corded with muscle and marked with scars. But it was his face that made Stella's blood run cold. The left side was swelling, a cut above his eyebrow still bleeding. His knuckles were torn and bruised. "You're hurt," she whispered. "It's nothing." He stood, and Stella instinctively took a step back. He was bigger than she'd realized, broader. The cafe had contained him somehow, made him seem manageable. Here, in his own domain, he was overwhelming. "Why am I here?" The question came out steadier than she felt. Adrian moved around the desk, and Stella forced herself not to retreat further. He stopped a few feet away, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his grey eyes. "You're here because you're in danger." "What?" "The cafe. The tips." His jaw tightened. "I was protecting you, but it's not enough anymore. Someone knows about you, Stella. Someone knows that I—" He stopped, seemed to reconsider his words, "that I have an interest in keeping you safe." Stella's mind reeled. "I don't understand any of this. Who are you?" Something dark flickered across his face. "You really don't know, do you?" "Know what?" "Who I am. What I do." He turned away, moving to the windows. Against the backdrop of the glittering city, he looked like a king surveying his kingdom. "I'm the head of the Marconi family, Stella. I control everything from the docks to the diamond district. I own this city in ways the mayor never will." The room spun. Mafia. The word screamed through her mind even though he hadn't said it. Organized crime, violence, death. "I need to leave," Stella said, her voice barely audible. "I need to go home." "You can't." Adrian turned back to her, and his expression was fierce. "There are men outside your apartment right now, men who would hurt you to get to me. The moment I showed interest in you, the moment I protected you, you became a target." "Then stop!" The word burst out of her. "Stop protecting me. Stop leaving me tips. Just leave me alone and this all goes away." "No." The single word was absolute. "It doesn't work that way. They've already marked you. The only way to keep you safe is to keep you close." Stella's legs nearly gave out. "You can't be serious. You'll stay here, in the penthouse, under my protection. I have security, resources. I can keep you safe in ways the police never could." "No." Stella shook her head frantically. "No, I have a job. I have rent. I have a life. Your jobs will be covered. Your rent will be paid. Your mother's medical bills—" He paused at her sharp intake of breath. "Yes, Stella, I know about your mother. I know about the second job, the debt, everything. I know you because I've been watching you for 6 months. Because from the first moment you smiled at me in that cafe, you became mine to protect." The possessiveness in his voice should have terrified her. Instead, it made something deep in her chest clench. "This is insane," she whispered. "Yes." Adrian moved closer, and this time Stella didn't retreat. "It is. But it's also your reality now. You can hate me for it. You can fight me, but you will be safe. That's not negotiable." Stella looked up at him, at this beautiful, dangerous man who had upended her entire existence, and felt tears burn behind her eyes. "I don't even know you." "Then learn." His hand lifted, hovering near her face but not touching. "You have all the time in the world now, Stella. And I promise you, no harm will come to you while there's breath in my body." The certainty in his voice, the absolute conviction, made Stella's resistance crumble just slightly. Because beneath the fear, beneath the shock, a traitorous part of her recognized the truth. She'd never been as safe in her entire life as she was in this moment, standing in front of a man who could destroy her world, but had chosen instead to shelter it. "1 week," she heard herself say. "Give me 1 week to figure this out. Then I decide if I stay or go." Adrian's eyes darkened with something that looked like relief. "1 week, but you sleep here tonight. I have guest rooms prepared." He moved toward the door, but Stella's voice stopped him. "Adrian?" He looked back. "Why me?" The question hung in the air between them. For a long moment he just stared at her, and Stella saw something vulnerable flicker across his features. "Because when you smile," he said finally, "it's the only real thing in my world." Then he was gone, leaving Stella alone in the study, her heart pounding, her world completely shattered and reformed in the span of an hour. 3 days. That's how long it took for Stella to realize her old life was already a ghost. The penthouse had become both sanctuary and prison. Adrian disappeared for hours at a time. Business he wouldn't explain, meetings she wasn't allowed to attend. But even in his absence, his presence saturated every corner. The books on the shelves reflected his taste. The food in the kitchen was all her favorites, things she'd mentioned once in passing at the cafe. He'd been listening, watching, learning her in ways that should have felt invasive, but instead made her feel seen for the first time in her life. And the clothes. Stella stood in the guest room closet, running her fingers over silk and cashmere, labels she'd only seen in store windows she could never afford to enter. Everything was her size, her style, but elevated. Like Adrian had looked at her worn jeans and clearance rack sweaters and understood the woman she would dress as if the world hadn't beaten her down. "Do you like them?" Stella spun. Adrian stood in the doorway, still in his work clothes, dark suit, crisp shirt, a lethal elegance that made her throat tight. "You shouldn't be in here," she said, pulling a robe tighter around herself even though she was fully dressed. "It's my home. It's the guest room that you're staying in, under my protection." He moved into the space, and Stella's back hit the closet door frame. "Which means I have every right to ensure you have what you need. I need to go back to work. I need my life back. You need to be alive." The words were sharp. "Which you won't be if Dmitry Volkov's men find you." It was the first time he'd named the threat. Stella's pulse kicked up. "Who is that?" "My enemy." Adrian's jaw tightened. "A man who would do unspeakable things to anything I value. And he knows, Stella, he knows I've been watching you, that I—" He stopped, turned away. "That you what?" "That I care." The admission sounded torn from him. "That for the first time in 10 years I give a damn if someone lives or dies. That makes you a liability, a weakness." Stella moved without thinking, stepping closer to him. "Then why not just let me go? If I'm a weakness, if caring about me puts me in danger, why not just forget I exist?" Adrian laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Don't you think I've tried?" He turned to face her, and the raw emotion in his eyes made Stella's breath catch. "For 6 months I told myself to stop going to that cafe, to stop watching you, to stop leaving those tips, but I couldn't. Every morning I would wake up and tell myself this was the day I'd let you go. And every morning at 7:15, I would walk through that door because 20 minutes watching you smile was the only peace I got in my entire damn day." The confession hung between them, heavy and charged. "Adrian, you asked why you," he continued, his voice rougher now. "You want the truth? Because you're kind in a world that's cruel. Because you work yourself to exhaustion for people who don't even know your name. Because even when I know you're scared of me, you still look me in the eye. Because you're real, Stella, in a world where everything else is a transaction or a threat." Stella's heart hammered against her ribs. She should back away, should put distance between herself and this dangerous, intense man. But instead, she found herself reaching out, her fingers barely brushing the bruise on his cheekbone. "Does it hurt?" Adrian's eyes darkened. "Stella, does it hurt?" she repeated. "No." His voice was strained. "But if you keep touching me like that, I won't be responsible for what happens next." Stella should have pulled away. Every self-preservation instinct screamed at her to retreat, but she was tired of being scared, tired of being careful. For 3 days she'd lived in this suspended reality, and the proximity to Adrian, to his intensity, his protection, his barely leashed control, had worn down her defenses to nothing. "What if I don't want you to be responsible?" The words left her mouth before she could stop them. Adrian went utterly still. "You don't know what you're saying." "Don't I?" Stella's fingers traced down from his cheek to his jaw. "I've been watching you too, Adrian. For 6 months in that cafe, I noticed things. The way you always sat so you could see the door. The way you tensed every time someone moved too fast. The sadness in your eyes when you thought no one was looking. I saw you. What you saw was a monster pretending to be human." "No." Stella shook her head. "What I saw was a man pretending he didn't want to be saved." The words hit their mark. Adrian's control finally snapped. His hand came up to cradle her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. "Stella, if I kiss you right now, there's no going back. No pretending this is just protection. No maintaining distance. Are you sure?" Stella's answer was to close the space between them. The kiss was everything and nothing like she'd imagined. Adrian's lips were soft against hers, but his hand in her hair was firm, possessive. He kissed her like a man starving, like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning. Stella melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer even though they were already pressed together. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. 1 week, you said, he murmured. You've been here 3 days. I know. Stella, if you stay, if we do this, I can't promise you easy. I can't promise you safe beyond these walls. My world is violence and darkness. I know, she repeated. But I can promise you that I will protect you with everything I have, that I will never let anyone hurt you, that you will be mine, and I will be yours in ways that don't exist in normal relationships. Stella pulled back enough to look into his eyes. Is that what this is? A relationship? I don't know what the hell this is. Adrian's thumb traced her lower lip. All I know is that I've killed men, Stella. I've made decisions that would give you nightmares. I've built an empire on blood and fear. But the thought of you leaving, of you walking out that door and taking your light with you, that's the only thing that actually scares me. The vulnerability in his admission undid her. 4 more days, she whispered. You have 4 more days to convince me to stay. Adrian's smile was slow, dangerous, and absolutely devastating. Tesoro, he said, the Italian endearment rolling off his tongue like silk. I only need 1. Then he kissed her again, deeper this time, and Stella felt the last of her resistance crumble. She was falling for a man who lived in shadows, who commanded empires built on danger, and God help her, she didn't want to stop. The screaming woke Stella at 2 a.m. She bolted upright in the massive bed, her heart racing, trying to orient herself. For a disoriented moment, she forgot where she was. Then reality crashed back. Adrian's penthouse. 6 days since he'd pulled her into his world. 4 days since that kiss had changed everything between them. Another scream, muffled but distinct, coming from somewhere deeper in the penthouse. Stella's hands shook as she grabbed the robe Adrian had provided and slipped into the hallway. The space was dark except for the city lights filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows. She moved toward the sound, her bare feet silent on the hardwood floors. The screaming was coming from behind a door she'd been told never to open. Adrian's private quarters. Stella hesitated for only a moment before turning the handle. The bedroom was enormous, decorated in the same minimalist luxury as the rest of the penthouse, but Stella barely noticed. Her entire focus zeroed in on the bed where Adrian thrashed, tangled in sheets, his face contorted in anguish. No, he gasped, the word torn from him. Please, Marco, non lasciami. Italian. He was speaking Italian in his sleep, and the raw pain in his voice made Stella's chest tighten. She approached carefully, unsure if waking him was safe, but she couldn't stand there and listen to him suffer. Adrian, she touched his shoulder gently. Adrian, wake up. His eyes snapped open, and for a terrifying second, Stella saw no recognition in them. His hand shot out, grabbing her wrist with bruising force. Adrian, it's me, it's Stella. Reality flooded back into his eyes. He released her immediately, jerking away like her touch burned. Cristo. He sat up, running, shaking hands through his hair. Stella, what are you doing in here? You were screaming. She sat on the edge of the bed, ignoring the warning in his voice. Who's Marco? Adrian's face went blank, carefully neutral. No one. Don't do that. Stella's voice was soft but firm. Don't shut me out. You've demanded honesty from me, vulnerability from me. Give me the same courtesy. For a long moment, Adrian just stared at her. Then, like a dam breaking, the words came. My brother. His voice was rough, scraped raw. Marco was my younger brother, 15 years old when Dmitry Volkov killed him. Stella's breath caught. Adrian. He did it to hurt me. Adrian's hands clenched into fists. To prove he could. Marco wasn't in the business, wasn't a threat. He was just a kid who played guitar and wanted to be a musician. But Volkov found him, tortured him, made sure I knew exactly what was happening while I tried to get to him. I was too late. The grief in his voice was so profound that Stella felt tears sting her eyes. She reached out, taking one of his clenched fists in both her hands. That's why you're so intense about protection, she whispered. Why you can't let me go. Why you watch me like you're afraid I'll disappear. I can't lose someone else. He stopped, swallowed hard. I won't lose someone else. Someone else I love. The unspoken words hung between them, and Stella's heart ached with the weight of them. You won't, she said firmly. I'm right here. I'm safe. For now. Adrian's jaw tightened. But Volkov knows about you, Stella. He's already sent men to the cafe 3 times this week. He's waiting for you to leave, to give him an opening. And if he gets his hands on you, he won't. Stella shifted closer, cupping Adrian's face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. Because I'm not leaving. Do you hear me? I'm staying. Not just for the week. Not just until it's safe. I'm staying because The words stuck in her throat, terrifying and true. Because I care about you. Because when I'm with you, I feel like I finally matter to someone. Like I'm not just surviving, but actually living. Adrian's eyes searched hers, desperate and disbelieving. You can't mean that. I do. And as she said it, Stella realized it was true. I don't fully understand this world you live in. And yes, it terrifies me. But you, Adrian? You don't scare me. You make me feel safe, seen, protected in ways I never have been before. Stella, his voice broke on her name. Whatever this is between us, she continued, whatever we're becoming, I want it. I choose it. I choose you. Adrian surged forward, capturing her mouth in a kiss that was equal parts desperation and reverence. Stella kissed him back, pouring everything she couldn't say into the connection. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. I don't deserve you, he murmured. Probably not. Stella smiled through her tears. But you have me anyway. They stayed like that for a long moment, wrapped in each other, the city's lights casting shadows across the room. Finally, Adrian spoke again. I need to tell you something else. His voice was tight. About why I was at the cafe every morning. About the tips. Stella pulled back to look at him. I'm listening. 6 months ago, my information network told me Volkov was targeting women, specifically women who worked in service industries in certain neighborhoods. Your neighborhood. I started going to every cafe, every restaurant, every shop in that district, trying to identify potential targets to figure out his pattern. Stella's blood ran cold. And then I walked into Rosie's corner cafe, and you smiled at me. Adrian's hand came up to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. Just this bright, genuine smile, even though I could see the exhaustion in your eyes, and I thought Volkov would destroy her just to watch her light go out. So I came back, every day. The tips were a test, to see if you were the type who'd disappear, who'd use the money for drugs or vanish. But you didn't. You just kept showing up, kept working, kept smiling. And somewhere between those morning coffees and those conversations, I stopped going there to protect you from Volkov. Why did you keep going? Because I needed to see you. The admission was simple, devastating. Because you became the only good thing in my world. Stella's throat tightened with emotion. I kept that first $100 tip in my wallet for a month before I spent it. I kept looking at it, wondering who you were, why you'd do that. I used it to pay for my mum's medication. Good. Adrian's thumb traced her cheekbone. That's what I wanted. For you to have what you needed. I need you to promise me something. Anything. Don't hide from me anymore. Stella's voice was fierce. Don't pretend you're not hurting when you are. Don't shut me out to protect me. If we're doing this, if I'm really staying, then I need all of you. The danger, the nightmares, the grief. All of it. Adrian stared at her for a long moment. Something like awe in his expression. You're sure? Because once you see all of it, there's no unseeing it, Stella. My world isn't pretty. I don't need pretty. Stella leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to his lips. I need real, and you're the most real thing I've ever found. Adrian pulled her closer, and this time when he kissed her, it was slow, deep, a promise made without words. When they finally settled back into the bed, together now, no more separate rooms, no more careful distance, Stella curled into his side, her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. Tell me about Marco, she whispered into the darkness. The good parts, what he was like. And as Adrian began to speak, his voice low and rough with memory, describing a laughing boy with a guitar and dreams bigger than the city, Stella held him close and understood. This was what love looked like in the shadows. Not perfect, not safe, but real and fierce and absolutely worth fighting for. The attack came on the 7th day. Stella was in the kitchen, attempting to make breakfast, an olive branch after Adrian had spent 2 days teaching her about his world, introducing her to his most trusted men, showing her the businesses, legitimate and otherwise, that comprised his empire. She was cracking eggs into a bowl when the power went out. Every instinct Adrian had drilled into her over the past week screamed danger. Adrian? She set down the bowl carefully, backing toward the hallway. Adrian! He appeared from his office in seconds, gun already drawn, his face a mask of deadly calm. Get to the safe room, now. What's happening? Volkov. The name was a curse. He's making his move. Go, Stella. I'll come for you. I'm not leaving you. You'll do what I say. His voice was cold, commanding, the voice of a man used to absolute obedience. Vincent will take you. Now. Vincent materialized beside her, his expression grim. This way, Miss Reed. Stella looked back at Adrian, terror clawing at her throat. Don't you dare die on me. Something fierce and tender flashed across Adrian's face. Never. Then, to Vincent, if anything happens to me, you get her out of the city. New identity, new life. She disappears. No! Stella lunged forward, but Vincent's grip was iron. Adrian, no, you can't. I love you. The words stopped her cold. Adrian's eyes were fierce, absolute. I love you, Stella Reed. And that's why you're going to let Vincent protect you. Do you understand? Stella's vision blurred with tears. I love you too. So you better come back to me. Always. Then he was gone, moving toward the sound of gunfire that suddenly erupted in the penthouse. The safe room was everything a paranoid crime boss would design. Reinforced steel walls, its own air supply, monitors showing every angle of the penthouse. Stella watched the screens in horror as men in tactical gear poured into Adrian's home. They'd come with an army. How many? She whispered to Vincent, who stood guard at the door, his own weapon ready. Too many. His jaw was tight. Volkov isn't playing around this time. On the screens, Stella watched Adrian and his men engage the intruders. Adrian moved like violence given form, precise, lethal, every shot finding its mark. But for every man who fell, two more seemed to appear. He needs help, Stella said. He's getting it. Reinforcements are 3 minutes out. 3 minutes might be too long. Stella watched as Adrian took cover behind an overturned couch, returning fire. He was magnificent and terrifying, this man she loved. But he was also just a man, mortal, vulnerable. And then she saw it on the monitor, a figure moving through the shadows behind Adrian's position, a gun raised. Vincent! She grabbed his arm. Behind him, someone's... The shot rang out. Adrian went down. Stella's scream tore from her throat. She lunged for the door, but Vincent caught her. Let me go. He's hurt. He needs... You go out there. You die. Vincent's voice was hard. And then his sacrifice means nothing. I don't care. Stella fought against his hold. I don't care if I die. I can't just watch him. You can and you will. Vincent forced her away from the door. Because that's what he needs from you. To know you're safe. To know this wasn't for nothing. Stella collapsed against the wall, tears streaming down her face, watching the monitors, as Adrian's men surrounded him, providing cover as he struggled to his feet. Blood bloomed across his white shirt, but he was moving, fighting, still alive. The next 3 minutes were the longest of Stella's life. When the reinforcements finally arrived, a flood of Adrian's men who turned the tide of the battle, she sagged with relief. The intruders were overwhelmed, captured, or killed. And through it all, Adrian remained standing, one hand pressed to his bleeding shoulder, barking orders, checking his men. It's over, Vincent said quietly. You can come out now. Stella ran. She burst from the safe room and through the destroyed penthouse, not caring about the blood or the bodies or the wreckage. She only cared about reaching Adrian. He turned at the sound of her footsteps, and his expression shifted from battle-hardened to something vulnerable. Stella, I told you to stay... She crashed into him, wrapping her arms around him despite his injury, needing to feel him solid and real beneath her hands. You got shot, she sobbed against his chest. You got shot, and I thought, I'm fine. His good arm came around her, holding her close. It's just a graze. I'm fine, Tesoro. I'm right here. Don't ever do that to me again. Stella pulled back enough to look up at him, her vision blurred with tears. Don't you dare tell me you love me and then almost die. That's not fair. Adrian's smile was soft, genuine, nothing like the cold mask he wore in battle. You're right. That was poor timing on my part. Terrible timing. Stella's laugh was watery. The worst. Then let me say it again under better circumstances. Adrian cupped her face in his hands, oblivious to the blood and chaos around them. I love you, Stella Reed. I love your strength and your kindness, and the way you chose to stay even when leaving would have been safer. I love that you see the man I am beneath the monster I've become, and I swear to you, On my brother's memory, I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret that choice." Stella rose on her toes and kissed him, tasting salt and blood and promises. When they broke apart, she rested her forehead against his. "What happened to Volkov?" Adrian's expression darkened. "We have him. He's in custody. This ends tonight." The words were a vow and a threat. Stella understood what he wasn't saying. Volkov wouldn't survive the night. Adrian would make sure of it. Justice, not by law, but by the rules of the world, he commanded. She should have been horrified, should have recoiled from the violence, the darkness. But all she felt was relief, and maybe that made her complicit, made her part of this world in ways she'd never intended. But she'd chosen this, chosen him. For better or worse. "Then it's over," she whispered. "It's over." Adrian pressed a kiss to her forehead. "You're safe now. We're safe." As his men worked to secure the penthouse and remove the evidence of the battle, Adrian held Stella close, and she finally let herself believe it. The danger had passed. The threat was neutralized. They'd survived. And in the ruins of what should have destroyed them, they'd found something stronger than fear or violence, or the darkness that defined Adrian's world. They'd found each other. 18 months later, Stella stood at the windows of the penthouse, her penthouse now in every sense, watching the sunrise paint the city in shades of gold. So much had changed since that terrifying 7th day. The penthouse had been renovated, the scars of battle erased. Volkov was gone, his organization dismantled, and with his death a power vacuum that Adrian had carefully, strategically filled. The Marconi family was stronger than ever. But more than that, Stella had changed. She'd learned to navigate Adrian's world with grace and strength. She wasn't naive anymore, wasn't the exhausted barista who'd served coffee and dreamed of easier days. She'd become something else, partner to one of the most powerful men in the city, protector in her own right, a woman who could smile at charity galas and still know where every exit was. Her mother's medical bills were covered, had been covered since that first night in the penthouse. More than that, her mother now lived in a beautiful care facility, receiving the best treatment money could buy. Stella visited twice a week, and her mother no longer looked at her with worry, but with pride. "Buongiorno, tesoro." Stella turned to find Adrian watching her from the doorway, his hair still damp from the shower, wearing nothing but low-slung grey sweatpants. The scar on his shoulder from that night was visible, a reminder of how close she'd come to losing him. "Good morning." She moved into his arms, fitting against him like she was made for this exact space. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep." His lips brushed her temple. "Too busy thinking about my wife." Wife. The word still made Stella's heart skip. They'd married 3 months ago in a private ceremony. No fanfare, no publicity. Just them, Vincent, and a judge, who Adrian had known since childhood. The ring on her finger was a simple band of platinum, but it meant everything. "What about your wife?" "How lucky I am." Adrian's arms tightened around her. "How I wake up every day amazed that you chose this life, that you chose me." Stella tilted her head back to look at him. "Still having doubts about that?" "Always." His smile was self-deprecating. "I'm a realist, Stella. I know what I am, what I've done, what I continue to do, and I know that you deserve better than a man with blood on his hands." "Stop." Stella pressed a finger to his lips. "You're not just what you do. You're the man who brings me coffee in bed every morning, who remembered that I love old movies and turned the media room into a private theater, who donated an entire wing to the hospital where my mother is treated, anonymously because you didn't want recognition. You're both things, Adrian, the darkness and the light. And I love all of it. Even when I come home late, covered in things you shouldn't have to see. Even then." Stella's voice was firm. "You think I don't know what tonight is? Where you're going?" Adrian's expression tightened. Tonight was the anniversary of Marco's death. Every year Adrian disappeared for hours, visiting his brother's grave, dealing with his grief in the solitary way he'd learned before Stella entered his life. "I was going to go alone," he admitted. "I know, but you don't have to anymore." Stella took his hand. "Let me come with you. Let me help carry this." Adrian stared at her for a long moment, and Stella saw the war in his eyes, the instinct to protect her from his pain, warring with the desire to let her in fully. "You're sure?" "I'm sure." Stella squeezed his hand. "You've carried me through my darkness. Let me return the favor." Adrian pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. "How did I get so lucky?" he murmured. "You walked into a coffee shop," Stella said softly, And I smiled at you. And you were brave enough to keep coming back. Best decision I ever made. They stood like that for a while, wrapped in each other as the sun rose higher. In the distance, the city woke up. People heading to work, living their ordinary lives, never knowing that in this penthouse, a barista and a crime boss had found something extraordinary. Later, Stella would go with Adrian to his brother's grave. She'd hold his hand while he wept. She'd learn more about Marco, adding to the picture she'd been building over 18 months of late-night conversations and shared stories. And in the evening, they'd return home, and Adrian would hold her like she was the only thing keeping him tethered to the world, because that's what love looked like in their world. Not perfect, not safe, but real and fierce, and worth every danger she'd faced to find it. Stella Reed had served coffee every day, never knowing the quiet customer was the most dangerous man in the city. And when she found out, when she saw past the danger to the man beneath, she'd made the most dangerous choice of all. She'd chosen to stay, and in staying, she'd found her home. This is where Stella and Adrian's story finds its peace. If this tale of dangerous love and unlikely salvation touched your heart, please like this video and share it with someone who appreciates stories where love conquers even the darkest shadows. New stories arrive soon, each one a journey into hearts finding home in unexpected places. Thank you for watching.